For those who are listening, I'm Shar from VEX. VEX is a cloud-based VoIP phone system that saves firms 50K per lawyer per year. It integrates with practice management systems so that tasks such as time recording are automated with every voice and video call that is made via VEX. So if you want to hear more about what we do, head to our website, vex.co.nz. We're super excited to have you all here for our first legal webinar. We have lots of awesome webinars coming up, so follow our LinkedIn to stay in the loop. The purpose of this webinar is for Alistair and Andrew to offer and give guidance on all things about starting your own law firm. We encourage you to ask any questions that you guys may have throughout the duration of this webinar. This can be accessed in the chats section below. And Andrew will see them throughout, but we'll also have time for Q&As at the end. So now I'd like to introduce you to our host, Andrew. So Andrew is the founder of the Legal Innovate brands, which helps lawyers and their firms to successfully leverage technology. We feel really privileged to have him hosting this webinar today and chatting with us, as he is an expert on all things legal tech and has helped numerous Kiwi law firms implement successful solutions to achieve their goals. So yeah, take it away, Andrew, and yeah, introduce Alistair.
Thanks, Shar. Thanks for inviting us along today to host this chat. As you mentioned there, I wear a number of hats, especially a lot of the work I do is helping lawyers and their organisations to innovate through leveraging technology. One of my primary roles is with e-discovery consulting, where I manage and advise on e-discovery matters, where I started out 20 years ago. And I started out working in a law firm and worked there for about 13, 14 years, and then went out about 10 years ago and now consulting to law firms and corporates all around sort of how to use technology more efficiently, how to do things differently and that. One of the other hats that I wear is that run the Legal Tech Hub, which is just a free resource all about legal tech here in New Zealand, about the legal tech organisations that are providing their technology both here in New Zealand and the tech companies from abroad that are providing their services in New Zealand. And the other thing which I've run for the last 10 years is Lawfest, which is New Zealand's premier legal innovation event, which is all about sort of how to innovate, adapt to change and leverage technology. And it's all about collaborating, networking and doing back in person again, which we're looking forward to back in 28th of September in Auckland. Shameless plug there, I have to get in. And I hope to see some people there when we get to that later in the year. A large part of what I do, as I mentioned before, is looking to try and raise the awareness of how to innovate and leverage technology. For the past number of years, I've done quite a bit of work of interviewing people through both Law Talk and the Legal Tech Hub and webinars like today with Alistair, trying to share people's journeys and different experiences and practical examples of how they're innovating and how they're actually leveraging technology into their practice. So really looking forward to today to really discussing that further. Just following on for what Shar just mentioned before, what we've got the Q&As there. So by all means, if you've got questions, I'll try and actually ask them relevant as we go through, but we have got some time at the end to cover them. So by all means, pop them into the Q&A and we'll address them as we go through. So just getting into things now, that's probably enough from me. So let's get on with the chat with Alistair. Alistair, good to see you. Looking forward to having a chat this morning.
Yeah, likewise, Andrew.
Right, to start off with, tell me a bit more about yourself and your firm and who you are.
Okay, so we're a property and commercial specialist firm based in Auckland, in East Auckland, in Howick. I brag to people that I'm about 2 roundabouts from home to the office and vice versa. So it's really nice. You can pop home for lunch. We used to be based in town and it was the best move I ever made.
So just yeah, to tell us a bit more about you personally, and how you actually got into the law as well. What brings you, before you actually got into Esco Legal?
Yeah.
Who's that?
So I was at university and I decided I wanted to study economics and financial management. My parents looked at me and said, look, we want you to study a real degree with a career attached to it. So the negotiated compromise there was that I did a Bachelor of Commerce and LLB at the same time. So, you know, I had my foot in each camp. You know, very much I've always looked at law as a business in the sense of, you know, it's got to make financial sense. You've got to deliver good service to your clients. And operationally, the more efficient you can be, the better you can do for your clients. So in about 2012, I joined a firm in town, was known as Esco Legal, sort of at that time, or Esco Lawyers. And they broke away a few years before that from a larger firm in town. In 2015, I went into partnership with the practitioner there. The kind of, just to give you an idea, it was a small firm in the sense of we had about 8 or 9 people in the firm, but we had 3 full-time support staff. Technology-wise, we were probably, I would say, average in terms of how law firms adapt technology. So we had a server on premises. We're operating Infinity Law's practice management software, but we're still running the old copper lines, physical phones that you know have to sort of stick to the side of your head. Physical desktop computers, single screens. You know, so again, for the time, probably fairly average, but certainly not had its issues. You know, lawyers talking into dictaphones and the like. So in about 2018, my business partner became seriously unwell. His wife decided to retire him at that point in time suddenly, and she'd been waiting for the opportunity. And, you know, for me, it was a bit of an opportunity to relook at the practice. I was commuting in from Howick. It's an hour in and an hour out on the ferry. Working remotely was very painful. You still had the old tape backup drives, if you remember those. Every single night you put a tape into the server. You know, and so that was sort of decided to initially at the time, because it was unplanned. I didn't have the self-confidence to go out on my own. So we merged in with another firm, and the idea was that they were going to also engage on the journey of becoming tech savvy. And after a few months with them, it sort of became clear that they didn't really want to adopt technology and implement change management. And that's when I made the decision to set up shop on my own, really.
Yep. So what was it like? Talk us through a little bit more about sort of that journey of re-establishing the firm and that. So what was that like?
Yeah, it was certainly very scary because you're setting up everything from scratch. You're going to the bank, opening up trust accounts, bank accounts, overdrafts. You're, you know, being on the other side of a lease. It's all good and well advising on a lease, but being the actual tenant is another story. So that was certainly interesting. And, you know, at the time, to find premises was very difficult. We had quite a narrow time frame to work towards. Fortunately, a good client of mine did interior fit outs, and I said, can you do this in 3 weeks? And he said, for you, absolutely. So we fitted out the premises, moved in. But yeah, a lot to do. So you have to lease premises, you have to organise phone lines, transferring, because we still have the old firm's phone lines, transferring over phone numbers, you know, re-establishing the websites, employing staff, fitting out the premises as in desks, chairs, all the rest of it, looking at your IT infrastructure, you know, what switches would you have, what hard firewalls would you have, the entire setup. So it was great in the sense that it allowed us to, you know, I think if we stayed in town and we never changed anything, we wouldn't be that dissimilar to where we're at now or to where we were then. but it was a great opportunity to sort of relook at everything and say, how do we do things? And take an example, trust account software or your practice management software, Infinity Law, it's designed for a very large law firm, and it's you have to have a server on premises. So we've identified that wasn't going to work for us. It wasn't going to work well, and it was a very complicated and clunky system to use and keep going, and very expensive to keep going. And we adopted action steps. So we had to then engage someone to pull all the client data through to action step, which is quite a process as well. But certainly has more than paid for itself in cost savings operationally. So yeah, it was very scary. It was a whirlwind 3 to 6 weeks to get it all sort of going and trading, and business cards getting printed. The list just continues on, but it was great.
Yes. So before we probably will dive a bit deeper into some of the technologies side and some of the software that you've mentioned there, but just before that, you're balancing running the firm and also practicing law. How do you juggle both?
Many early mornings and late nights, certainly. What you sort of find is the smaller the team that you have is, the more there just isn't any sort of room for you to take any time off or anyone else to take time off. Because initially when we started as a team, we were only 3. And we're now up to 10. And certainly with a bigger firm, there are, more headaches with managing more staff, but it's easier on everybody. You can, I was overseas a couple of weeks ago on holiday, and I could do it. The first time I've done it, and it was great. Didn't look at emails, didn't, receive phone calls. And so, I think you need that balance, because it's been 3 years now, and it's been a long, tough road with its certain challenges as well. Because as well as lawyers, we've got to comply with the Law Society requirements as well. So, the trust account supervisor course you have to undertake, and you have to keep all that kind of stuff current as well. So yes, it's very challenging, but I think for the right people, I'd encourage them to back themselves to do it.
So looking a bit more into sort of what's changed since you started the firm. You've mentioned sort of your initial journey and that, but sort of just go a bit deeper into sort of what's actually changed in the last few years.
Well, I think we've been adopting technology more and more in terms of I think replacing being less reliant on support staff. So, if you look at a firm about 10 years ago, the number of support staff, actually legal executives per partner or associate, was significantly higher than now. So in town, for a firm our size, we had 3, well, our turnover is more than it was in town anyway, but we had 3 full-time support staff. We now have 2 part-time support staff. So, less than effectively 1 full-time person. And that's a significant cost saving. So I think what sort of changed is, as solicitors, we work more in a team, but we're less dependent on support, and we do more menial things ourselves, because technology enables us to do it so quickly that it takes just as long to ask someone to do it than it does to just do it yourself. And I think that to me is what has changed. So to give you an example, in town, when you did your monthly billing run, what you would do is you would put, you get your trust accountant to pull a list of files where there's work in progress on it. You would pull out your dictaphone and you would talk through each and every matter and, give a description of the work you've done on each one, and the typist would type it all out, and the trust accountant would put it on there and prepare a draft invoice, and you would review them, and you would scribble on those draft invoices, and you would send them back, and they would get tweaked, and eventually they would go out in the mail. What Action Step enables us to do is it's so easy and intuitive. Our authors, we generate our own invoices. Yes, we do our own narrations as well, because it's just as fast to put a 2-paragraph narration in that it is to sort of ask someone else to do it for you. So and I think often the quality of the invoicing is better in that sense, because it's hands-on versus broken telephone. So yeah, to give you an illustration, that that for us has changed significantly.
Yeah, just on that, no, I know there are still a lot of people out there that are still got manual processes, and some of the
well, I mean,
what they're doing today.
The insanity of it. When I tell people outside the law that what lawyers do is we send an email, we then print the email off, we walk to the printer, we pick up the email, we then take a file, we spike it on the file, and then we send the next email. We print the email off, we walk to the printer, and you tell people that lawyers used to do that, or some of them still do, many do. I think you're insane. You should see their faces. They're like, cannot believe, that's a thing. So, that's sort of...
Some still use the fax machine as well.
Yeah, we still have a digital fax line to receive faxes, but we'll probably turn that off in the next sort of year or two. But certainly we've thankfully moved away from that. Yeah.
Well, that definitely sounds positive. That's for sure. But just going a bit more into the technology you're using, you mentioned ActionStep. To tell us a bit more about sort of what are the tools, the technology that you use day to day in your practice.
Okay, yeah, so maybe I'll sort of just step through that. So yes, we use ActionStep. That's our practice management software. We use that for our trust accounting. Now, the core difference between the ActionStep and like Infinity Law is ActionStep is cloud-based, where Infinity Law is you have to have an on-prem server. So for those who are looking to set up a firm, if you're looking to set up an on-prem server, it's probably now about $25,000 to $30,000 to set one up. Plus you've got your licensing fees and all the rest of it. You have to pay an IT company about a couple of grand a month to keep the thing going. Then you have to deal with your backups, because then you'll have to pay for a service to now probably back it up to the cloud, because if the building burns down, your information is shot. So ActionStep keeps everything in the cloud, and the advantage of that is not just, well, if your building burns down, that's not a problem. It's also like, when we had to work from home, and some of our staff do work from home anyway, it's with Infinity, you had to sort of log into your computer in the office and physically drive it, and there was the lag, and it was really painful to use and slow and buggy. And if the connection dropped, you needed to phone someone in the office to physically log you back on. Whereas cloud-based, it's a seamless. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. You can, if you've got an internet connection, you can access your client files, you can respond to clients, you can do your work. So that for us is a core system. We use Office 365. So Office 365, so that's your Outlook, your Word, all the rest of it. That integrates with ActionStep, meaning if I send an email, on the right-hand side margin, it comes up with suggestions of files that this email relates to, and 9 times out of 10 it actually picks it. So you just click a button and the email would immediately link into your practice management system. So you've got a very good sort of order record of everything that's there. Whereas printing it out, manually spiking the file, just crazy. So that's sort of the action step. Then when we set up originally, we used, I think it was TwoTalk to do our voice software. So TwoTalk, so anyone who's had VoIP software, there's sort of 2 issues with it. The first is that the call quality often is not fantastic, and the reliability, and certain phone numbers don't work for certain reasons. So that was an ongoing frustration for us for some time. And the other issue I had was, it's all good and well that you can find a phone number and then dial it, and we started moving towards wireless, in the sense of, this is my phone. So my computer and laptop is where I dial through software, instead of a physical phone you pick up and sort of dial on. But the software that you'd have to use was some Canadian software, which was really hard to use, and you had to manually key the number in each time. And often you phone a number and you dial the wrong keys, and it just takes so much time. And I thought, there's just got to be a better way to do it. And I'd say to ActionStep, look guys, don't you have someone that integrates, so that if you click a button on, because you store an ActionStep, your client details, that it'll just be there. I happened to sort of jump on about a year ago, and I saw that they had this new partner called Vext, and so I got in touch with them, and they'd sort of just been getting into this kind of area, and it's just been, you wouldn't sort of think it now looking back, but how transformative it is for a business to have phone software that integrates with, you know, your practice management and your emails. Because I mean, what do lawyers do? They talk on the phone, they email, right? Pretty much, right? And so if you have everything sort of talking to each other, it actually is really, really good. And I'll actually take some time to sort of talk through the pains that it has taken away from me, right? So, so what Vext does as a software system is it integrates with ActionStep. So every time, if I say I want to dial, phone a client, so it pulls the entire client database onto Vext. So I can search in Vext and dial a client if I know their name. Or if I'm in ActionStep and I'm looking at a contact, I can click on their phone number and it will launch through Vext and phone them. I don't have to dial their number. So there's no risk in me getting it wrong or anything like that. When I'm on the call, you can take file notes in Vext, and then when you finish the call, you can link the file note back to the matter. And at the same time, you can record your time. So it'll say, okay, you've used 3 units of time. So in ActionStep, you have the file notes of the phone calls. You've got the time recording that you then capture of, because it's prompting you so you don't sort of miss those units of billable time that you could have charged, that flow through and feed into ActionStep as well. Better yet, and something that I don't think anyone sort of realized is that when clients phone you, their number comes up on the Vext software system because it knows from the client database this is the person who's phoning. So every time you phone and let's say Susie hasn't rung you in 3 years' time, but she rings you up to talk about updating that will or doing something, and you say, "Hey Susie, how you doing? How you keeping?" At the same time, while you're saying that, you're busy opening her profile up on ActionStep to remember who she is and what it's about. But she's incredibly impressed because you remember her. She's important, right? And that kind of stuff is just great. You'd think, why has someone else not done it before? And it's just, there's just stuff like that just to take away the everyday pain.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, like, I hated getting my voicemails and retrieving my voicemails. And how many times do you phone someone and their voicemail says, "Don't leave me a voicemail, send me a text," and you're like, "Oh." The other thing with Vext is it actually transcribes your voicemails. I never retrieve voicemails. It just, in an email, pops the transcribed voicemail. I mean, sometimes it's quite funny, the sort of the words that sort of gets wrong. I mean, you understand exactly what the voicemail says, and which is fine, or you can hit play and listen to it as well as if you want to. But it's just another pain point it takes away. And I think that's the one thing I want to sort of encourage lawyers is that a lot of lawyers are very scared about technology or resistant to adopting it. But you just think about the pains in everyday life, and if it can take the pain away, why wouldn't you? So that's really good for us. The other bit of hardware, I guess, I mean, maybe to talk about is when we, with the lockdowns and sort of how things changed for us when they were implemented, we still had physical desktop computers at that time. We had headless phone sets and 2 screens and all the rest of it. But we then very quickly purchased laptops for everybody in the office. And whoever's got a laptop set up with a docking station, you realize how good it is, because you just pick up your laptop, you go home. If you need to work from home, you can. And so for us, that's been a really good sort of change as well. So that's a bit of transformation we've done post the move here. So I can highly recommend using laptops. Touchscreen is very user friendly.
Something you touched on there before was you talked about integration, how they ActionStep Vext integrate with each other. How you work, why is that so important to you? And where I'm coming from here is that sort of in the past, you used to have some good tech out there, but they all operated in silos and nothing talked to each other. So you were having to, you open one thing up and you did whatever you need to do there, then you had to do the same thing again.
Yeah.
Why is that such an advantage with some of these
Yeah,
technologies?
very good question. So I think there's two things to it. One is integration prevents duplicate data capturing because the systems talk to each other. And I suppose the other advantage is, and Xero sort of really started off with it, was saying, look, you know, no software system can do everything. If they think they can, they don't do it really well. I mean, Infinity Law, theoretically, you can do practice management, you can do your trust accounting, and you can do your business accounts as well. It's absolutely hopeless at doing your business accounts. I mean, you don't get your data feeds like you do in Xero. So it's really clunky and hard to use. And in town, but it was insisted in town we had to use it. And our accountants would charge us thousands of dollars every year to take the manual accounts prepared there and put it into the Xero or Myob or whatever it was. So integration means you don't duplicate what you capture. It allows you to pick and choose the best elements of suites of software to work the way you operate your firm. So yeah, probably in summary, that's where I'd say is good.
Yeah, no, definitely. And looking at sort of the journey of changing a product, you mentioned moving from Infinity to Action Step. Just how did the journey work? Because we all know everything doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. So I was fortunate in the sense that my brother's in IT and data warehouse management, so he knows a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do and than some other people do. And so he helped us with that, and he actually now works in conjunction with Action Step when they bring people from Infinity Law over, because I think Infinity Law for people who are technical uses SQL Server, and it's about pulling that information in. Now, you can't pull your historical trust account information through. That unfortunately, you know, just doesn't fit. But we were able to pull through our files, our digital, so that includes, like, you know, all your emails, all your letters, anything saved digitally. We were able to pull those through. Our contact details for clients, there's certain sort of minor things like in Infinity, it still has the old style where you have husband and wife as sort of like a joint contact. We Action Step, every single one is an individual now. And so it would pull things through and link a deeds packet to the husband, but not the wife as well, because it splits the contacts in the process. So there's certainly a few sort of issues like that you have to work through, and like your archive file, because we still have sort of old files in town, you know, stored. So your archive file numbers didn't quite pull through, so we had to sort of keep a separate sort of set of those. So there's a few pains and things that don't quite pull across the way you'd like them to. But honestly, the sooner you make that kind of change, the better. Yeah,
and you talked about the products there, and they're both sort of New Zealand based as well. I think I know from my experience that sort of a lot of we live in the real world, and a lot of things don't always work well. But I think with any sort of tech implementation, it's about the partnership, and it's not just implementing the tech and then you're off and then you're on your own sort of thing. So
it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Look, it's interesting. It's ongoing. What I like about having worked with those two is that they're incredibly responsive because they're local. They're not sort of too big that you don't matter. And if you feed them back as a user, look, if you do this, it'll save me 2 to 3 clicks here. It'll save me a bit of time. This is intuitive. You know, they take it on board, and Vexed often rolls something out the very next day. You know, so they really turn things around very quickly. So that's what's really nice, because it is an ongoing partnership. It's a journey, and as you do things, you know, nothing is perfect straight away. It's impossible. And when you doing something, you realize the whole time you realize there's more options opening up for something to be slightly more efficient, incrementally more efficient. And I think that's, you know, they understand that you can't stand still. You keep having to keep moving forward. Yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So just moving aside from yeah, the tech itself, just looking more across the board, when you're considering new technology, how do you start that process? What are you looking for? And how, before you actually look at the particular tools themselves, what do you do? What steps do you take?
Yeah, so I guess you look at the pain points that you've got and see where the technology can try and take some or most of that away. The other thing is also change management. So I was very aspirational about us being virtually paperless, which we now are. And that's all good and well, but you've got to get people to accept and adopt the new technology. So that other firm I was briefly at, they also implemented Action Step. By implement Action Step, I mean they theoretically have Action Step. Do they use Action Step the way we do? No, they physically print everything out, run around with hard copy files to this day. But so you've got to implement technology, and you've got to get people, your staff, to adopt it and embrace it. And I would say, depending on people's ages and stages of life, some are easier to convince and faster adopters, and others who have done things in a certain way for a longer period of time take longer. That's why I think the lockdown was actually really good for us, because while we were well on our way to transform ourselves to being paperless, we certainly weren't. And it forced a couple of the staff members who were struggling with making that transition to have to make that transition. And now that they have, they, very grateful, and they would never work the way they used to. So I would say it's, when you look at new technology, you've got to say, what's the time saving I'm going to potentially get here? What's the ongoing cost of operating that software? And what's the challenges in the change management that you would need to work through with your team to see if it's worth sort of that effort you're going to put into to do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. I'm sure, yeah, many will resonate with that. I think there's a lot of really good tech out there, but first of all, you've actually got to understand what you actually want to do, what your pain points are, and look to the tech to actually help solve.
Absolutely. I mean, there's software out there that is really good from a litigation perspective. I think Bundle Docs, it's helps lawyers who work in that area. Not an area we work in, so we just know that it's just there's no benefit for us. So yeah, it's looking at what you do, what the benefit is, what it's just not just the ongoing cost, but the ongoing savings that you would get, and what you would how much change you're going to need to push through. And I think maybe the other comment I would sort of make is that I've sort of learned is, it's all good and well being eager to implement new technology, but you probably want to phase things in, because if you change everything, the staff can be very shell-shocked, slowly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think yeah, there's a lot to say for incremental change. I think that sort of really, really helps that buy-in and sort of getting people sort of comfortable with the new technologies, instead of actually overnight the whole world changes.
The whole world changes, yeah.
And that's a really good segue to talk about how the whole world changed. Looking at COVID, you mentioned the lockdown before, but generally, sort of how have you adapted, and with that, since COVID as well?
Yeah.
And how you work?
Yeah, look, it was certainly a stressful period. We were very fortunate because when COVID came, our computers, was where our phone systems were software based already. So we didn't have to have physical phones. We just took our headsets and our computers, and those computers, after the first lockdown, the first thing I did was purchase laptops with docking stations to make us even more mobile, because we realized that with, then you lock down and then you're allowed to go back in and then you lock down, that we need to be more mobile, flexible as to where we're able to work in the easiest way possible. So COVID forced us to duplicate our IT infrastructure, in the sense that every single person in this office has two screens on a stand, headset, laptop, docking station, and that is completely duplicated at home as well. So if they're unwell and can't come from work in the office, they can work from home seamlessly. So if someone phones them, it rings at home. You know, you wouldn't even tell, you can't tell the difference. Where other law firms, when the lockdown hit, they had to try and divert their landlines to mobile phones because their landlines are physically sitting in the office, and they had your physical, I forget what it's called, you know, that's an exchange for the phone systems, the internal one. And they were very, you know, very much sort of fixed in what they could, you know, do in that sense, technology-wise. So it's changed that for us. We also have a flexible work policy. So I've sort of found 3 days in the office, 2 days at home is not a bad balance.
Yes.
So we can have some team members working on that sort of basis, and it works well for them. And I think it allows enough time in the office to keep that sort of team cohesiveness. Otherwise, it's very easy to be ships passing in the dark if, you know, people don't even sort of see each other. So I think that's been a healthy, positive development. The other issue we had with COVID was, of course, getting documents signed.
Yes.
Because many clients didn't have printers at home. There was some sort of late afternoon, you know, drop-offs in post boxes and that kind of stuff for certain clients like that. You know, what we could do to sort of accommodate them. Obviously adopted Zoom to meet with clients virtually over the phone. And I think that's been a real positive, because an incline meeting lasts at least an hour if they come into your office, whereas over Zoom it's 20 minutes, maybe 40 minutes tops, and you cover the same ground. It's just, I suppose, if they come all the way to the office, there's the expectation of more niceties up front, which is lovely, and you know, there's a balance for that. But it's more efficient because, and you know, clients appreciate it because they don't have to come out and see you. So it makes your location of your office less relevant as well. Having more online meetings, and most things we can sign over Zoom as well. You know, there were certain times during lockdown where we had to do wills, execute wills over Zoom. So certainly digitally, we were doing a lot more document signing, and it sort of, I think, pushed that along. Our only real issue at the moment is the banks don't accept documents signed digitally yet, or generally they don't. And I'd like to see, and I'd like to think they will move forward in the next year or two to enable that. That to me would be the next sort of step of efficiency.
Yeah, no, and though I think in a lot of ways it sounds like sort of a lot of the work you did pre-COVID put you in a pretty good position to.
Yeah, and I think it.
Can.
Yeah, 70% of the way there, and then certainly, you know, there was more work to do, and there's certainly some positives that have come out of that situation for us.
Yeah, and I think when you compare, there are like COVID came along, and for a lot of people, it's sort of a lot of law firms, especially, it was very much that four walls mentality. Sort of everything that actually happened
in these four walls. Yeah. I mean, we've digitized the vast majority of our deeds as well. And that's an incremental time saving because, you know, as an example, a client wants to open up a bank account for their trust. So what does the bank need? It needs a copy of their trust deed, needs a copy of the deeds of any change of trustees and all the rest of it. And, you know, you would normally have to go, you know, dig in the back office, you know, pull it out, scan it in, email to the client, whereas it's just all sitting on our system. So the client, while I'm talking to the client on the phone, because I got both hands free because I'm on my wireless headset, open up an email, drop the file in, and send it to them. You know, it's just making life easy.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good example. Even like physical meetings with people, everything had to be inside the office or out at the client, but the amount of people that had been reluctant to sort of use technology and that, and we sit here today through Zoom and Teams and that, there are a lot of other ways to still carry out working, but differently. And I think a lot of people, it's taken COVID to actually sort of realise that sort of, okay, let's look to sort of change some of the things that we do that are painstaking. You look at you might go to a meeting and it takes you an hour and a half on the motorway or whatever to get there. Can you have that half an hour meeting via Zoom?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, going to see council in town, exactly. It's 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back, parking. You pay a fortune, and just jump on a call. You save yourself easy 2 hours in the exercise. So it's been, those kind of, I guess maybe the good thing is that what lockdown has forced a lot of people to move forward. But employees can't blame their bosses for being mean and making them do it. It's not their fault. There's this overarching COVID, it's COVID's fault. That's been the stick or the rod, the proverbial rod that's forced people to move forward. And I'd like to think generally for the better. I mean, yes, it's been a hell of a hard time, but it certainly is a silver lining for me.
Yeah, and just finishing off sort of that COVID sort of side, as we move forward, what do you think will last, will be sort of ongoing as far as how we work and that we've learned over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that your client meetings being on Zoom versus in person and documents being signed via over Zoom or digitally, that will stay. There will be less of it initially in the sense of some people will go back to the old habits. And some people do want to meet in person, or at least meet you once or twice in person, and then they're happy to meet over Zoom. So I think where you found it was always in person, now there's going to be a mix, and that mix will probably vary from generation to generation and client to client. I think working from home is certainly an option. And, again, sort of like this hybrid working, 2 to 3 days at home and the other days in the office. I think there'll be a lot more of that, and that will last because people enjoy that flexibility. And, certainly if, this day and age, if someone's got a sniffle and they're well enough to work, but no one wants them at work.
No,
I've got two team members at the moment. They're working remotely today because, they're unwell. But it's a sniffle and they're happy enough to work. And so it's great for productivity and for them as well.
And as we move forward and look to what's next, what's next for ASCO and what's for how you work, and even with technology, what happens next?
I don't know. You're going to have to tell me in September.
Oh, that's a great segue.
Yeah, I think there'll be incremental gains. I mean, what's next for us? I mean, we've grown significantly over the last sort of 2.5 years, and maybe we'll look to taper that off a little bit and try and consolidate. Technology-wise, I'd like to think that digitally signing documents will become more commonplace and accepted and more efficient for doing, particularly on the bank side. I'd like to think that's sort of the next cab off the rank to, because I mean, at the moment, just to give everyone an example, from a conveyancing perspective, when we close a conveyancing file, we actually don't have a file left. Nothing gets printed except the banking documents and the A's and I's. We digitize everything and we shred what the client signs. So if the clients can sign digitally, then what's the problem? Will you have to print out? Nothing. You'll have a complete digital file that you never have to scan or shred anything, because there was never, ink on paper or wet signature, as the banks like to call it. So I think that would sort of be the next step, and then we'd probably be virtually paperless then at that point. Where we are now, certainly will be then.
Yeah, and just going into a bit of more of a putting your crystal ball gazing hat on, looking at some of the opportunities for law firms with technology sort of further afield, where do you see things in the next 2 to 5 years as far as using technology?
It's an interesting question. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the States about AI and AI looking to sort of replace lawyers. I don't think personally, and I may be wrong, I don't see that happening. I think that human interaction can never truly be replaced. But I do think that AI would maybe have some kind of a role in anticipating what you've been wanting to do for your client, and sort of doing step 1, 2, and you do 3, 4, and 5,
Yeah.
or refine step 1 and 2, but it's sort of taken you 80% of the way there. I see a space certainly for that to a greater degree.
Yeah, and I think in some ways the AI, it's replacing tasks as opposed to sort of humans thing, and hopefully in a way it's actually making humans make more informed decisions.
Yeah. Like, I mean, when Xero came out, accountants were fearing that Xero was going to replace the accountants and the need for accountants, and it certainly hasn't. And nor would I think software would. I think it's an enabler. It's not something that replaces people.
And just to finish off, if you had to have to give a couple of practical tips to someone that's starting, innovating, or trying to actually have the right mindset, what would be a couple of tips that you could give to someone starting out?
Yeah. Well, I think that the big thing, the hurdle for me to get over was for me to back myself, to trust that I can make it work. And I think, that's probably the biggest hurdle that you really have, to use your relationships that you've built up to sort of get you going. So be it the bank manager that can help you set up your trust accounts, be it the client who knows how to fit out offices, or the agent who deals with commercial property and can find you premises, the IT person who's a client of yours. So look at those relationships. Lawyers, we're very lucky. We interact and meet many people. And if we take a step back, often we know all the right people we need to put the ingredients together to make it work. So on the innovation front, I would just encourage everybody to look at come to Lawfest, look at the technology that's out there, because it certainly will really help you. And yes, change is painful in certain ways, and people get comfortable in their space, but if you don't put the hours in the gym, you'll never get a six-pack. Not that I have one, but the principle applies for your firm if you want to make it operate better, and certainly have better sort of audit trails. Digital's the way to go.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of questions through the Q&A there. I'll sort of summarise them generally. Sort of when you made the choice to go down the action step path, what a couple of people have asked is why you made action step as opposed to some of the other practice management software options that are out there. One of the ones that was mentioned was One Law. So why did you go with action step over some of the other options?
Interesting question. So I guess at the time when I was joining the other firm, they were looking to change their practice management software as well, and they had looked at Action Step as a preferred option. I think for me, it probably was sort of the right mix of it integrated with Outlook the way I'd like it to integrate. It felt intuitive. The trust accounting software side of it is very easy to administer. So if you operate Infinity Law as an example, there's only a handful of trust accounts left in the country that know how to generate things properly, where Action Step is fairly straightforward. So I guess it was that, and that I could see that they were very driven to constantly improving themselves. And so I guess I'm not saying that it's better than any of the others necessarily. And, it's been a number of years, so I suspect the others may look far different to when I looked at it now. So, I think everyone should look at what's available with an open mindset, and not just accept that is the be all and end all of it. But it's look at how you work and what that practice management software can offer for you.
Yeah, definitely, and I think you make a really good point there. Everyone has different needs of what they're looking to get out of it, and what one tool might work for one organisation, another tool might be better suited to them. And I think You need to do your homework. You need,
Yeah.
and I always say to people, see what's out there.
I would be careful to go too niche though, in the sense if there are one or two products that are very niche. Some practitioners look at the cost, the monthly cost side of it, and I just don't even think you should, because you use it every day. It's probably the cheapest thing ever, if you look at it in that sense. But the one thing I would say is that people get used to using a certain system, and so if you use a very niche system and you employ staff that have been using a different system, there is sort of that transition and getting them used to using the system and processes the way you would as well. So probably look at the market share of whatever you're using as well, or intending to use.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, that seems to be all the questions. It's probably, a good time to, thank you, Alistair. It's been really great to hear your journey, but I think what I really appreciate is the raw practical examples that you've shared with us, which is, I'm sure that a lot of people will resonate with and take a lot from. So thank you very much for that. And I'll pass back to Shar now, who will wrap up for us.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hi guys, thanks so much for that. That was, all the stuff you guys talked about was super valuable, and we appreciate you guys coming and having a chat to everyone here and offering your tips. So thank you, and thanks to everyone who joined the webinar today. We'll be following up with a recording and also some contact details for everyone as well. So if you want to hear anything more, or you want to get in touch with them or us, you're more than welcome. And yeah, so like I said before, this is our first webinar, so follow us on LinkedIn, and we'd love to have any feedback or any thoughts on future webinar ideas as well. So I'm sorry, there's a cat in the background that's making lots of noise. But yeah, thanks so much everyone, and have a good rest of your day, and feel free to ask any questions later on.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thanks guys.
Thanks.